I'm going to skip on the next one. Lacan justified this on the arguments of Aristotelian logic, and in order to create a class, a set, he will go to Bertrand Russell's theory of sets and also the mathematics of Frege, but I'm not going to go into that tonight. I'm going to just to tell you that the formulas has this meaning. I'm trying to convey to you this meaning. That, for example, let's see the left side. It is necessary that there exists an X that does not follow the phallic function. Who is that? Well, according to Freud, was the father of the horde, the guy who had all the women and all for him, and he was killed, and they create a law, the universal law. So in that case, it's necessary that exist that affirmation in order to be able to say for all X, phi of X. For all subjects that are inscribed in the phallic function, then there is the definition of the masculine position. This is to say that it has to be an affirmation of an exception to create a class and saying all men. It has to be one that didn't follow, at least mythical, like this idea that was never proved, the father of the horde, is a little metaphorical narration that Freud did on totem and taboo, but Lacan tries to formalize here to desexualize the anatomical function of the phallus as an organ and create, when we talk about here the phallus, we are talking about a signifier. It has the value of castration, the value of phallic jouissance. On the other hand, if you look on the right side, we have an impossibility. There is no X, there is no subject, that position that is not phi of X, that is not ruled by the law of castration. There is no exception there. So it prevents to establish a universal. So the formula must be read from the perspective of contingency. For example, there is some woman that X works and some that are not. And when I say woman, I'm referring to a logical position, a subjective position that has nothing to do with biology. And this opens up a clinic, the clinic of not all phallic, that's what I'm saying. The first point to take into account is that in both cases, there is a relationship with phallic jouissance. There is an element of union, which allows that somehow there is a certain relationship through the phallus that acts as a signifier for both positions. Because the presentation is that phallus exists as a signifier, but there is not a signifier for women pleasure. That's why we know so little about that position. The subjects in the woman position cannot articulate the nature of the enjoyment of the jouissance that they experience in terms of a class valid for everybody. Therefore, there is an impossibility that creates the particular. It will have to be one by one. As I comment already, it's important not to confuse the phallus with the male organ, but rather it is such an organ elevated to the level of the signifier as a symbolic order, so it can symbolize the structural castration of the organization of all enjoyment. Like any signifier, it can signify that it means to be a man or a woman for each one with the subsequent identification of one of the parties without the need to reduce it to the biological body. Both positions maintain a relationship with the phallus, but the way they do is different. On the masculine side, we have that all jouissance is governed by the phallic function, except, of course, for the existence of an X that negates the mythical father of the horde. On the feminine side, not all jouissance is governed by such a function, not all X phi of X. In the absence of an exception that it makes it possible, we cannot close the set and remains open. It opened the door to a jouissance that is not countable, non-relatable, and non-localizable in a delimited part of the body. We should talk, when we see this, not all, as a negation. That is not should be seen as a sign of incompleteness or as a mark of a minus, but instead of a plus. There is a phallic jouissance in the subject who are inscribed in the feminine position, but in addition, there is a relationship with another jouissance that does not exist in the masculine part. This is a supplementary jouissance. So we have here that all beings are affected by castration. Although there is a relationship with the phallic function, the negation of the existential prevents there from being something that functions as a limit. And that goes to the lower part. I am not going to get into that tonight, because I would rather engage with you in conversation, and I have more to tell you in a few minutes. I would like to just mention that Lacan scandalized by saying the woman doesn't exist. When you say the la femme n'existe pas, the woman doesn't exist. Apparently a lady was so furious with him after saying that he met with her the following day after his lecture. What he was trying to say is that because since there is a lack of a place of exception, implies that there is no possibility to form a set class. We can say all men because the phallic universal submits them completely. But there is something in the woman that manifests itself, even for the subject, as a mystery, other reasons, a radical alterity, being beyond the phallic function, cannot be said, nor is it susceptible to any calculation. I mentioned that just to explain briefly this. The lower part should probably engage us in another meeting regarding these formulas of sexuation. We have to understand this limitless, because cannot form a closed set. That is, it is a not all of inconsistency and not all of incompleteness. What was shown as a lack is now manifest and a limitless, and therefore as the unlimited. As the unlimited ways of expressing jouissance, I will add. You know, could you please, Rosalind, put me on the camera so I engage with everybody? I cannot see anybody though, but you are listening to me, right? Is the hearing okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Maybe you want to put your view to gallery view. There's a little icon on the top right. It says view. And then you just put your mouse on top of it and it'll show speaker, gallery, immersive.
Enable meetings, gathering. How do? Can you say again, Rosalinda?
Okay. Put your mouse on the top right corner of the screen. It'll say it'll be like a box there that says view. Put it on top of there, and then you'll get 3 options.
Oh, because I don't have that because I'm doing this on an iPad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to guide you with an iPad.
Oh, don't worry. Most people have the camera. The camera is off except the Pew, but doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I address to them because they can see me, right?
Yes, you're fine.
So listen, just a final word because this is an rather complex topic. It's a very late Lacan, and I try to convey to you a very vast conceptual apparatus, and that I will offer in a very small doses in a seminary eventually. But for example, I would like to say that Lacan has been accused by many feminist, gender and queer scholars of reducing the understanding of the notion of jouissance to the experience of jouissance of the heterosexual men living in the context of a bourgeois society. Somebody has the speaker on. If you don't mind, would you please close it for a moment? In the scenario described by Freud in Totem and Taboo, it is true. It's all about the father of the horde and the jouissance of the brothers. What is at stake? Women are simply an object of exchange. This is complex because Freud tried to denaturalize genital sexuality in his 3 essays of sexuality. And on the other hand, in Totem and Taboo, he's turned into certain social values. Freud is like Einstein. You know, Einstein discovered the relativity and then spent all the years debating with Bohr about his own discovery. He's saying it cannot be like this. It cannot be random, like the quantum physics presents. Freud is ambivalent into the values of his society and his own discoveries of the unconscious. Lacan only emphasized that part, and Lacan did not return to Freud literally. He returned as the French word retourner suggests, which means 180-degree return. It's a different approach. He proposed a new logical approach to sexual difference, as I just showed you. By describing the logical terms of the masculine position, Lacan desessentialized Freud's male side of sexuation and turned it into a universal function, capable of including into its logic men and women alike or any other subjective position. For Lacan, which by the way, we are talking about the 60s, was one of the first psychoanalysts who attend transsexuals, and he addressed to them as they prefer role or gender. He will call to a man who can dress as a woman, ma chérie, my dear, in feminine. Psychoanalysis still have a depth to transsexual subjectivity because it was not long ago that was considered psychotic. I am not going to enter that. I'm saying psychoanalysis is evolving and we should listen carefully the clinic of the 21st century. But I do think that Lacan offered the tools, the conceptual tools, by focusing on the ways of enjoyment to understand the truth of the aspect of the unconscious. So, for Lacan, the sexual difference is not much a question of gender or sexuality, but a type of jouissance. Maybe in our current capitalism, and perhaps even more in science, technology, ego ideology, even some discourses of feminism, they still have this idea of push all of us to a place of universal, ruled by a fantasy of an absolute satisfaction from the market. And perhaps we should talk of the particular way of jouissance, which, by the way, constitute the root of the ethics of Lacanian psychoanalysis. This is what I prepared for you tonight, and since we started a little late, I'm quite sure we can extend a few minutes, perhaps with comments, questions, critics, if you would like. I very much would like to know your input as far as, at least if I was able to introduce this formula, which are complicated process, into something that is able to be comprehended for somebody who is not familiarized with this text. Would anybody would like to do a comment or question?
I have a question. Excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Great. So I was just taking some notes here, very sparse notes, and you can correct me if this is off base. What I was gathering here, I wrote down, trying to make sense of your formulas here, Lacan's formulas. I had two separate lines. One is all, and maybe you can help clarify this for me. All phallic enjoyment is related to all jouissance would be a more masculine position, and not all phallic enjoyment is related to not all jouissance would be a feminine position. Is that?
About the masculine position, I agree with you. About women are, of course, the position of the woman, the subjective position is also involved with the phallic function. It cannot escape because it's inscribed on the symbolic, but it has a surplus. It has a plus, which is that jouissance is not all, some of them, not everybody. Lacan referred, for example, to the mystics. That's one of the references that he does. He refers, let me see, I took notes on a seminary 20, he refers to the sculpted face of Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint John of the Cross, of the mystics. I myself write about the subject of music, which involves different jouissances and may involve both alternating types, and so on. The difference with the discourse of gender is that we are discussing from something that we cannot control. Language controls us as we depart from an unconscious choice. And this is something that differentiates clearly the discourse of Lacan from other theories, cultural theories. Do this answer the question, or?
I'm trying to let's say figure out this formula. You say you may agree with my statement on the first one, on the masculine. On the second one, would it be more fair to say on this feminine equation? Thanks for showing this. Would it be fair to say? And the symbols and stuff are a little hard for me to, I'm kind of...
Sure.
I mean, it is useful to show.
I mean, some people that read this in a Freudian way, which I disagree. Most of my presentations are to disambiguate Freud and Lacan, and Lacan from his translators, following, trying to find the original text and different array of presentations of the Lacan seminars. Basically, not all women are rule for the phallic function. Whatever speaking, let me read for you Lacan. Actually, it's a phrase of Lacan that is actually incredible. Listen like this. Lacan says, and let me read this. On the right side, you have the inscription of the female part of the being that speak. The right side was not every woman is inscribed on the phallic function. Any being that speaks, whatever it might be, whether or not it has endowed with the attribute of masculinity, yet to be determined, Lacan in 1970 says about that is allowed, as the Freudian theory explicitly formulates, to register in this part if he joins. He will veto all universality. He will be on the not all. Not all is phallic. As insofar he can choose to be in the phallic function or not. Such are the only definitions of the part called man and the part of called woman for which it is in a position to inhabit language. That's the phrase of Lacan. So he's on the 70s already questioning this idea of male, female, and when you start to try from the imaginary to start adding categories, L, B, T, G, plus, I emphasize the plus, because the plus is the X. But all of them are inscribed in this logic. They cannot escape the phallic function. We might contest the name phallic, but it's a signifier that represents for a speaking being the function of how the position stands in terms of the men, what we call man's side for any speaking being, and a woman's side for any speaking being. And by the way, we all change and trade positions all the time.
Can I ask you one last one, and then I'll allow everyone else time here. You said you just said not everyone can escape the phallic function, but earlier didn't you say not every woman is inscribed on the phallic function?
Yes.
And those are, I suppose I'm having a hard time.
I mean, you have both. There isn't any woman, any X, anybody inscribed on the feminine position that does not follow the phallic function. But there is some women that they escape the phallic function. So they have both. The woman has this double nature. For once, the jouissance is a phallic jouissance. But then there is an irreducible to the signifier. That's why it's not possible to talk about this type of jouissance that defines a femininity. Not all is defined by the phallic function.
That makes sense. You cleared it up. That makes sense. Thanks.
Great. Anybody else who would like to? We have maybe 5 more minutes. Rosalind, is okay to just in a few questions or comments?
Yes, of course.
Great. Anybody questions or comments? I'll talk myself if you don't. This is a problem with the. It is clear that we are talking about jouissance, and also that there are some issues to still are pending on that. For example, there was a presentation in 2019 in Paris. Paul Preciado was invited to give a talk in woman psychoanalysis. he was Beatrice, but he became Paul, transgender. He became with 4 people, invite different subjective positions to tell you, I'm a monster who talks to you. And he criticized the patriarchal society, but I think his understanding of Lacan was not on the level of what I'm talking to you today. There is a Lacan that explained clearly that is the connection to jouissance, to the type of enjoyment that defines a particular position. And we are unconscious of it. This is not my choice. And the human position involves a continuous lack.
I have a question. Did you cover this? Maybe I missed it, but did you talk about what exactly the pleasure principle is?
The pleasure principle?
Yeah, when you talk about on your slide 8, the technical meaning of Lacan's teaching of jouissance. I don't know how to say it in French, sorry.
That's okay. No, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you know that Freud thought that we are ruled like Aristotle. Let's start. Aristotle thought that we have to be rational and contained and we will be happy. This idea of common good. And it doesn't work. Freud said, well, everything we want is just the pleasure principle. But then he realized that in the clinic, that the most he emphasized that people were suffering quite a lot. So they started to understand an ambiguous way of relating was jouissance. And for Lacan, he needs linguistics. So he designates that there is a relationship with language that produce subjects, and the excesses and distortion that a language and culture can introduce into a living split the subject. So you will have some forbidden subject that is unconscious, that Lacan called that the jouissance of the other. Let me tell you an example. For example, in a clinical case, somebody has incarnated the other as an uncle who died 40 years ago, but told, you have to be a lawyer. And that person is always trying to be a lawyer without liking to be a lawyer. He's following a command, a jouissance. He's satisfying without knowing a command written decades ago by somebody who is not there anymore. And then there is the other type of jouissance, the second one that is the socially allowed, that Lacan called the Phallic jouissance, which is the one that we call the engage without friction between what we call the sexes or the subjective positions. The only difference is that in Lacanian terms, language is the base in which we are turned into a body. It wouldn't be a body without language. This is opposite to any logic. It has no common sense. But this is the logic of psychoanalysis, like in physics. This is not common sense. We inhabit language, and language creates a subjective conformation. We know that something happened before. We were babies, we were a physical, an animal, what you call it, whatever you're gonna call it. But this other that speak to us creates a sort of relationship and dialectic. And from there, we will have a sort of a way of enjoyment. And the la of the moms might be a sort of original enjoyment of the nonsense that music provides. And that's why one of the reasons I play music, because it's nonsense territory, it's pure signifier. There are many aspects I couldn't cover. I tried to just give a first approach to this idea of Lacan absolutely against psychology, against common sense, and the idea that everybody can have a conscience. I can be gay for 2 days, but 3 days I will be a lesbian. The next 4 days I will be another category, and then thinking that I am the one who decides when I am being talked into a position. And that is mostly the main topic of the discussion. The territory of the subject of the unconscious and the way of jouissance, the way of enjoyment that implies a degree of pain. It's music and enjoyment. People tell me, oh, you're so lucky you play the cello, the most beautiful instrument. You know how many hours and how much afraid I am when I have to perform? I prepared for you these two yesterday, and how in a stage, how many stage fright I suffering I go, and I love it. I have to do it. I couldn't live otherwise. Is that enjoyment or is that masochism? Well, it would enter the territory of jouissance, definitely an enjoyment, but with a portion of suffering. That defines us humans against animal that has an object, a drive and an object, hunger, food. We are not. For each drive that we have, there are many different objects. For each individual, each subject would be a different way of enjoyment. And that's, for example, the case of Don Juan. I don't know how to say in English, Don Juan. You say that he was, instead of calling him a womanizer and all that blah, blah, blah that feminists do, I do differently. That's a guy who tried to say, women are a mystery, and I want to know all, one by one, understanding the different way of jouissance. It's an impossible task. But the point is that woman cannot be defined as a class, but as a subject, one way particular to another. And when I say that, I'm again going back to men and women as on the traditional roles. Men and women can inhabit any anatomical body. Is any comment regarding about what, if it was, if you found this approach, if it resonates with you and your way of thinking of anybody, or by opposition, or by whatever association you might have?
I find his work. I struggle to connect with it. I'm trying, but I mean, my background, I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but Lacan is new to me, somewhat new to me. I have had people tell me that he's so difficult to understand, it's good not to read any of his primary sources until you have some understanding of the basics. And I think I still struggle. The connection, this concept of language being the medium, and that you said a while ago that it is not it's not language as it might be developed through culture. That's very hard for me to understand.
Je suis un autre. I am other, the poet says. Lacan Lacan is not difficult if you sit down and read from Seminar 1 and repeat each chapter. You start. The problem with Lacan is to follow the sources that he's following. He follows Freud and departs from Freud and starts to be an opposite of Freud in many ways. And then he started following different, for the 4 discourses, he analyzed Kant, and Kant, you have to understand Kant and Sade, the Marquis of Sade, or for example, in this particular case of the formulas, he followed this mathematical set class theory of Russell and also Aristotelian logic. The idea of language is that there is no essence. We don't have an intimate essence. For Lacan, a subject is what a signifier represents a signifier. I ask you, for example, I tell you, you ask me, who is your essence? I'm a musician. Well, but the chain continues. Well, I'm also a man. What do you mean a man? Well, somebody who does these things. And that's finished? That's the essence? No, it's not. It's an endless, because there is no essence. There is only discourse. When Aristotle says the soul is the thinker of the body, it's only Aristotle words, discourse that we are listening. There is no essence, there is no identity for Lacan. That's totally imaginary. The idea of self is totally alienation. For Lacan, the idea of being self, I'm myself, and I have my unconscious, and I'm going to discover my real problem. No, the unconscious is on the surface of my discourse. And it will appear on the dreams, on the lapsus, on the associations. This metonymical translation, Lacan used the figure of topology in order to understand a subject that has an emptiness inside. Against the idea there is something, it's normal, Lacan says everybody speaks a different language. You choose a set of words in your family. Another family chooses a set. Let's start with table, and we might agree. But let's go to freedom, and let's go to, whatever well-being is, and you will see that sometimes perhaps we inhabit different worlds. And those worlds are structured in different discourses. And not all that, those discourses are not even ours. We are intertwined with the discourse of who incarnate the other, who usually are the mother, the father, the reference, the discourse of a period. Those are the big other that creates what we think is our idea, or what we think is what I do, like the teenager. I don't want to have dinner here. I want to be me. I want to have dinner 3 a.m. because I am me. Why do I have to follow this society? I am me. The me he's talking about is alienated by different discourses and is an imaginary entity. We use it in society? Yes. I have to present to you, I'm a cellist, I play for you. I'm a psychoanalyst. Yes. But this is imaginary if I think that this is the essence of me. To understand better, we should enter the realm of what Lacan called the real, which is inscribed in us and we don't know about it, and creates the repetition that we suffer from, which is a whole different topic, and a whole meeting could be the concept of real in Lacan. What is real, which has nothing to do with reality. Real is what resists symbolization. For example, in the medieval times, the messenger, sometimes at night, they tattoo his head, the back of the head, putting them, kill me. And the messenger of the king goes to the other place to deliver a message, but he has inscribed something that he doesn't know. And his life depends on that. He's going to be killed because of that inscription. For Lacan, we are inscribed with what he called the letter. We call the real is the letter, and that's what we look on the session. We are trying to decipher the letter that defines the message and where the command comes from. It's inscribed on the discourse, not any big cave like metaphors of deep depth, deep soul or anything. No, just the plain discourse. I hope I can bring some idea.
And that's very nice. That last piece is very nice. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. If anybody has some comments, I love to. You are so kind not to address the issue that is relevant, that is not other subjected in the ways of expressing, and this is something to be discussed in further meetings, how reasons established on the trans culture, for example. That's something that the clinical psychoanalysis is changing, and as we are, Freud was the time of hysterics. Lacan started his clinic with psychosis, and the logic it became a way to understand psychosis as something that was inscribed without a law. That's why in psychosis the suffering could be limitless, and it has to be addressed. And psychoanalysis on Lacanian create a clinic not to heal the psychosis, but to create a stabilization. That's part of my job at the Men's Center, which is a Lacanian place in Houston. It's exclusively Lacanian place. I am a teacher at the Psychoanalytic Society in Houston. They don't pay attention to me. They don't give me talks. They're all medical doctors. They want to hear cognitive science, and they think reality is this, what you touch. For Lacan, the real is defined by language. I couldn't even mention this part if I don't use language. My body is the result of language, not of anatomy. Like the paralysis on the arm of the hysteric for Freud. The difference with psychologists in our colleagues, which I respect, like you present yourself, is I think you probably help a lot, but with psychoanalysis we have a crucial difference in terms of we don't know what is normal. We ask everyone, what is I'm a man, woman? We don't know. We claim ignorance, and we want to create a master signifier, and from there create a chain of discourse that will be the discourse of a particular subject.
So understanding the master signifier is really key.
Master signifier, please understand that it's actually, it's a key, but it's actually the discourse of the master, is the discourse of, pardon me the expression, but Lacan mentioned on the text, and I said with respect, the S1, the signifier one, is a stupid one, Lacan says, because it is nothing without the S2 that explains. And I say to you, blue. You said to me, blue what? Blue sky. And you said, go on. Blue sky is what I'm longing for. I had the pandemic and I haven't been out of my room for 3 years. And you say, that's your chain. So your first part, blue of the sky, is the first signifier. Being trapped inside an apartment for 3 years is another. So acquires meaning when the analyst creates a stop, a point of interpretation, saying, I got it, until there. But we understand that our main rule is to do not understand. We claim ignorance. We do not understand, and we ask for the chain to be further explained. And from there will be the letter will come. And sometimes even the most inefficient analyst will catch it, because the letter repeats itself. In one session or in the session number 10, in some session we will catch the letter, and by the letter I understand the logic. A logic of the unconscious, and where the reasons established on that particular subject. And by jouissance in this, I refer not on the side of musical expression as enjoyment, but on the side of suffering as a symptom. A symptom is an excess of jouissance. So that's the way we understand this. In a logical, for us, the cure comes as a byproduct, not because I give an answer. It's a byproduct of the work on the discourse, or as Lacan said, the work on the symbolic, intertwined with imaginary, that will give us some insight, sometimes on the real, like lightning that happens on your window, a lightning for a second, and you see the light of the lightning. Okay, that's how we see the real and the unconscious, appears and disappears, opens and closes. And we are listening to that. It's just a model with certain technique. And Lacan creates the statue of psychoanalysis as a science. He mentioned that 52 times in his work. Only one time in Baltimore, he says psychoanalysis is not a science if you consider that on the Karl Popper sense, in order to be falsifiable, because you cannot produce the testimony of clinical. If you under that paradigm, is not. But Lacanian very much associated with a conjecture physics, and how do you say the physics that is speculative physics, that theories of physics. Behind, for Lacan, the formula hold the key. I mean, the bridge is not the bridge itself, is the formula that creates the bridge. So we are trying to decipher the formula that creates what we eventually call the symptom, the reality, or whatever construction. Well, I hope this was interesting for some, and if you engage on more interest on Lacan, I will be presenting a Lacan for beginners, going step by step. One of my frames tonight will be a whole session on Lacan. It's going to be a class over a whole month, as I will present, in order to understand the clinic and how it works, and who are we talking about. What are we talking about? It's a very foreign way of epistemological exchange way in the United States. Language is not foreseen as the main source. People think there is a persona in front of us. We don't see a persona, we see a discourse, and the other comes by product. And that's a huge difference that has to be explained, and then maybe we can shake hands of different lines, different ways, and shake hands saying, I understand you, understand me, that's fine, but it's very popular in South America and some places in Europe, and it has a clear effect on the clinic, as far as I can tell. Thank you to all. It's already 4 o'clock in Houston. My home is there, my home is there, but I am at the moment out of the country for personal and also research reasons.
All right, thank you so much, Marcelo. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to send me an email. I can forward that to him.
Oh, would you mind, please, Rosalind, just put 20 seconds, my PowerPoint number 9. Because if anybody would like to contact me or to know about my recordings or my presentations, my books or articles, if you are able to pull page number 1 and leave it for 10 seconds for anybody to take a picture and then send me curse words for introducing sexuation in such a complicated way, or comments or about my work, I will be so happy to engage.
I'm going to email everybody because you have some links there.
I have a links to my personal email, my website. Yeah, email to everybody, please, and that would be great.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rosalind. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.